Alright, so this week we are talking about fat here. So, first thing I want to talk about is people being scared of fat. I just use the term fat phobic. Usually generations just above me runs rampant, but this is two reasons. Either you're afraid that by eating fat you're going to get fat, or two, it's going to give you some form of heart disease. That's just the mainstream media tells you. And that's simply not true, and we're going to get into that a little deeper here. But the idea that fat is going to make you fat does hold some merit, because yes, fat does convert to fat in your adipose tissue in your body much quicker. But then again, gaining fat simply comes down to the energy balance thing. So if you're tracking your food and you're eating close to the range you're supposed to, and you're eating quite a bit of fat, it's not going to be fat being the culprit. It's going to be eating too much food, and I hope you understand that by now. So then going into some recommendations here. When I prescribe people their fat intake, I use this range, 20 to 35% here. And that amount's just going to be different depending on what you want and the modality of the training you're doing and the time of the year. So like if I was focusing on simply strength training, I would probably be at the higher end. And that's just because the nature of what fat does in the body. And that's going to be hormonal production. So if I'm boosting up my hormonal production, it's probably going to help the growth of new tissue, muscle. And then my one big takeaway for you that I could just say, like a few just general recommendations I can give out without even knowing you, is fat after your workout is not going to be good. So fat, if you look at the molecule fat, it's this huge molecule, sits in our stomach really heavy, it's really hard to digest, and that's not what we want after our workout. After our workout, we want to digest that carbohydrate and protein right away to begin that recovery process right then and there. So then going into some different types of fat. First, we're going to look at these top two. So unsaturated fat, this is going to be more plant-based fats. Saturated fat, more animal-based. So of course, the media is going to point their finger at the animal-based products because animal-based foods have been under fire here for the last couple of years. Not rightfully so. But the main thing is when you look at it in these studies and you dig a little deeper than just looking at chronic disease, you can't just simply point your finger at saturated fat. That's just not true. We don't know enough information to say saturated fat is the culprit. So my main takeaway to you is eat both in moderation. So it's good to eat unsaturated fat and saturated fat. Just don't eat all of one. That's the best advice I can give you. But then the one thing we do know, trans fat is horrible for you. This stuff is from the devil. And we know this to the extent that it's actually going to be illegal in the later part of the year. So this is used in foods to increase the shelf life. So when you're eating your frozen pizza, frozen chicken nuggets, frozen enchiladas, I don't know, just a food that is trying to have a long shelf life, the chance of it having trans fat is going to be pretty high. It's also in a lot of fried foods, fast food. Typically low quality food is going to have trans fat. And that's not going to be a problem here soon. The quick way to figure out if just some other random food does have trans fat is in the ingredients, it will be hydrogenated something oil. So hydrogenated vegetable oil, for example. Just look for the hydrogenated something oil. That will give you trans fat. And that's just simply because like this is so bad because we know this is just artery clogging material. Like the correlation between trans fat consumption and heart disease is extremely high. And we know that, and that's why it's illegal. But we don't know that about saturated fat yet. So the last thing here, omega-3 and omega-6. So when you look at fats and you break it down, they either fall into omega-6 or omega-3 here. And in our bodies, the modern American diet, we are going to be consuming much more omega-6s. And this is just the nature of processed food. And the bad thing about this is it's inflammatory. And if you're inflamed, the amount of widespread effects you can have throughout your body is pretty large. And we know inflammation is not good. And omega-3 is much better anti-inflammatory. So if you're an athlete, you should really be thinking about this balance. It should be about a 2-to-1 ratio in the body. The modern American has about, I think it's like 6 or 7 to 1. So it's way out of whack here. And what I do to supplement omega-3 is I take fish oil every day, but that's not necessary. It's only a supplement. So you can obviously get this through your diet, through eating salmon, mushrooms, and a few other odd foods that if you're eating pretty consistently, your omega-3s will be dialed. So make sure you subscribe below. Let me know if you got any questions. I would love to help you out with any questions you got about fat.